Hello. It is my great pleasure to introduce my husband. It makes my life a lot easier that I don't have to research all of his many accomplishments and many talents, since I'm very well aware of all of them. It also makes me super happy to see that all of tonight's honorees are being honored not just for their personal accomplishments, but as people who amplify other people. I think that in Silicon Valley, we hear a lot about the solo inventor. And American culture has a long history of giving credit to a single individual for technological advances. And as a Canadian, we have a sort of national pastime of like pulling people down off pedestals. Like, we don't like heroes, but I can see how it's actually really nice to be able to point at a genius like Thomas Edison and say, there's the guy, who invented the light bulb and the movie camera and the gramophone. Except, it's not really true. The reality is a lot more messy and complicated than that. There were prototypes of working light bulbs when Edison got in that game. To my view, his most important contribution was what he called his invention laboratory. So he brought together these brilliant, hardworking people, and he made sure that they had the resources to do the experiments that they needed to do. And that was really where all of these inventions were born. He was famous for saying, nothing good ever works on its own. You gotta make the darn thing work. And they tested thousands of prototypes of light bulbs before they found one that could stay lit for enough hours to make it worthwhile and that didn't cost a small fortune to manufacture. And I think that X at Alphabet, the Moonshot factory, is really the direct descendant of Edison's invention laboratory, because it does bring together these brilliant minds, and they do have the resources to run their experiments. But I think X is even more than that. It's a lot more than the sum of its parts. And that's because it truly has an environment of innovation. And it's not like any place I've ever heard of before. Astro doesn't just pay lip service to things like fail fast. He actually creates a culture where people are not afraid to fail, where actually people feel proud of saying, I'm gonna kill my project because it's not going the way it's supposed to go. He actually creates an environment where people can be vulnerable, where they're not afraid to open their mouths and say something thinking that people are gonna think it's stupid or I shouldn't say that. Like, he creates this environment where people can contribute. And he also really values teamwork. And I think one of the most wonderful things that he and his colleagues have done recently is they've set up this program where they praise the unsung heroes in the organization. The people who amplify other people, the people who, behind the curtain, sorry, my mouth's dry, are creating the value that brings the organization up. Astro doesn't come home and complain about, oh, the drone didn't take off today. Or like the self-driving car has some sort of design flaw. Like, that's not what I hear about. I hear about the people and how they're doing, how well the teams are working together, because he knows that it's not the lone genius who usually makes progress in our society. It's people working in a team toward a common goal. And I'll just finish by saying that Astro sometimes gets called a genius. And he will say he's not a genius because he grew up in a family of geniuses. He has a grandfather who was a famous physicist. He has another grandfather who won a Nobel Prize in economics. I'm so proud of you. He has a brother who's like a total prodigy. But the Latin word for genius, it means someone who has a guiding spirit, and I think you're a true genius.
I was also attracted to that idea when I was a kid that you could have, two people in a garage in kind of frayed jeans and the t-shirt with the ironic saying on it, and they'd have the brilliant idea, and then it's worth $1 billion. Good job. It's so not how it works. It's so not how it works. And part of the issue is that, that myth obscures the fact that sequestering two, usually white, usually men, in a garage is a terrible way to get any kind of efficiency in innovation. It's literally the cottage industry of innovation. You're see how much we can get blue-footed boobies going on in every one of these things by getting the walls as high in between them. It's not how you would design it if you were trying to get any kind of efficiencies, any kind of experimentation, because you want to lower the friction between groups so they could talk. You want diversity of ideas in order for those things to happen. And as Danielle was saying, that's exactly what Edison noticed and pointed out more than 100 years ago now, was that it might be possible to make an invention factory. And that inspired Bell Labs, which then engendered some of the most important things that happened in the 20th century, like the transistor or the laser or the satellite. They had a few good hits. And Xerox PARC, which was in some ways its the intellectual prodigy of Bell Labs, which really kind of created Silicon Valley. It's where the mouse and the windowed system and object-oriented programming came from, to name a few. And for however well or poorly we're doing it, that's what X is trying to be. That's my mission in life. People ask me all the time, what's your favorite moonshot? And it's, first of all, I don't want to pick between my kids. That's just not fair. But the truth is, my moonshot is trying to systematize innovation. It's trying to build on top of that noble legacy of noticing that if you got a lot of people together and you created the right intellectual and emotional atmosphere for them, they might do really unusual things together. That's my moonshot. And so what I've noticed, especially over the last 8 years that we've been building X, is that there's this thing that you tell them to go do, fail fast or whatever that is. Go that way, guys. And then in most organizations, I bet you've all seen this, they run that way. I'm what are you doing? I said, go that way. That way, woo, it's gonna be awesome. And they just keep running that way. And the reason is because people follow the emotional paths of least resistance. If you tell your kids, no screen time after 4:30, and then you go right back to typing on your computer, they just almost literally can't hear the words you're saying because they don't care what you say. They only care about the fact you don't care about screen time, obviously, so they don't care about screen time. It's the same thing in any organization. If you want people to be brave, if you want them to be weird, if you want them to be creative, you can't just say, go take risks, go take smart risks, be creative, say interesting, novel things. Nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. But if you say, when someone brings up an idea that's, hey, let's make it better by 10%, and you say, ooh, that's kind of embarrassing, like their fly's open or something, they'll stop saying it. Social norms are incredibly powerful. If somebody says an idea like, could we harvest the power in an avalanche? The only correct answer is, oh my God, what a gorgeous idea that is. It doesn't matter whether you can actually harvest the power in an avalanche. What matters is when they say that, you are telling them, I value that your brain makes statements like that because that's where real value is going to come from. And then they're glowing inside because you said that. And you're training the people around them to say that. And then, here's the trick. You say, hey, wait, before we leave the room, let's try to kill your idea. And this becomes natural and seems normal after 200 or 300 times that you've done this. Get on the whiteboard. Let's see together if we can kill the idea. And you spend, it turns out, only to take a couple minutes on the whiteboard, and you can kill that idea. And you give them another hug. You give them another high five. You say, that was world-class critical thinking. Great job. And they leave beaming because they somehow came up with an idea and killed the idea. You would think it nets to 0, and socially it mostly does. And yet they left with 2 credits in their pocket instead of 0. It sounds too good to be true, but that thing, if you want people to be passionately dispassionate, you have to help them feel like you care. You have to make an organization that doesn't just say it cares, you have to put them up on the pedestal and say, these are the things we value. And you do that not by saying that you value them, but by actually putting them on the pedestal. I'll give you 1 or 2 little examples just to help you feel like what it's like at X. If you ever come visit X, you'll see we have like a little micro museum in like our lobby. The jewel cases, a lot of people have those. I invite you, if you come and visit X, to look in those jewel cases. And you will see that there is dirt on some of the objects in there. They're beaten up. I challenge you to go to another company and find mangled prototypes. They'll have prototypes because they're proud of building stuff, but they won't be mangled because they don't really value, what they value is the building. They don't value the learning, but the learning comes from it getting mangled. The learning comes from throwing yourself, from you as a team getting out in the world with your precious thing, your idea, which is not going to work. I know it's not going to work. I love it that you have the bravery to try even though it's not going to work. And if you don't put their mangled thing on the pedestal and say, we put this out in the world and it got mangled and we're proud to have done that learning, that's actually how we got to something important. If you don't do thousands of those little things, no one's really going to take risks. No one's really going to run experiments. So what I'm passionate about is trying to unlock that. And if I could leave you guys with a thought, people think, oh, well, you have all of Alphabet's money behind you. You know, I can't afford to get hundreds of PhDs from MIT and Stanford. It's not the PhDs. It's not the raw intellect. That's actually not where innovation comes from. It comes from being different. It comes from being weird. It comes from being brave. It comes from being creative. And every single one of you and every single one of the people who works in your organizations, they were all like that when they were 6. Every single one of you, every single one of them was like that when they were 6. You've just forgotten how. They've forgotten how. But you could find it again. You could help them find it again. They could help you find it again. So if I could leave you with something, it's you don't need a huge pile of money. You don't need some special people that only I have. I really believe that the secret to taking moonshots is creating an environment where you amplify other people, where you make it safe for them to be the best version of themselves. So I'm really honored by this award. I appreciate you giving it to me, but I'm accepting it tonight on behalf of all of the Xers who used to work at X, who currently work at X, and will ever work at X. And I want to celebrate their bravery and their weirdness in taking their moonshots. And I hope that we can inspire you to do a little bit of that yourselves. Thank you very much.